Womanjika everyone, Gululu, and welcome this morning. Today I start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we are, the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and future. To the people joining us online, I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various places where you're all joining us from today. And I extend that respect to all First Nations people who are joining us here today for this event. An acknowledgement of country is such a beautiful thing. It is part of an ancient tradition of welcome to country. And it's so great that welcomes and acknowledgements are now part of any good event in Australia. It's a symbol of reconciliation and that change is really happening. But at its core, it's really a symbol of respect. My name's Angela Crossland. I work at the GPT group and I look after social sustainability. I was born in Perth on Noongar country, and as a non-Indigenous person born on Aboriginal land, I acknowledge and recognise my responsibility to country. And I also love the amazing cultures that we have here in Australia. I want to thank the many people who've shared their culture with me, who inspire me, and who've welcomed me into their community all around the country. It's wonderful to be here today as part of National Reconciliation Week. This is an important event in Australia's calendar, and all around the country this week, people are hosting events, acknowledging country and community, and coming together to mark the occasion. Reconciliation is all about that. It's all about bringing people together to reflect, to learn, and ultimately to address racism and build positive change in Australia. We're really excited to bring this event to life today, and thank you so much for joining us. This is a new thing for us. Typically we host a National Reconciliation Week event with our people, but this year, in the spirit of reconciliation and off the back of a couple of really weird years, we thought it would be more important than ever to bring together our tenants and some of our amazing partners that we work with across the country. We know many of your organisations have reconciliation action plans like the GPT group. And I want to thank one of our tenants, Macmillan Shakespeare Group, for supporting this event today as a sponsor. Their contribution didn't go for paying for this event. It actually has gone towards helping shape a beautiful First Nations business that's based up in Broome. And Jira, one of our speakers today, will talk a bit more about that. Macmillan Shakespeare Group are launching their wrap today, which is really exciting. And on behalf of GPT, I want to congratulate them for stepping up and making a public commitment to making change. We're excited to hear what your wrap brings to us. So this year's theme is Be Brave, Make Change. And boy, haven't things changed in the last few years. The pandemic has impacted so much in how we work, how we live, where we play, what we do. And we now have this incredible opportunity to change how we do things. I'm not going to dwell too much of the horrible stuff that COVID's brought to us in the last few years, but I do want to look back briefly, because in 2020, it's estimated that 26 million Americans protested as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Data science companies have said that this could have been the biggest movement in America's history. During this period, there were mass rallies in about 1,700 locations and across 50 states of America. And we certainly felt that here in Australia too. The other thing we're feeling here in Australia is climate change. You can't open a newspaper without coming across a headline about climate. Companies, governments, and even non-profit organisations are being held to account for their role in addressing environmental impacts that they have. So we know that racial equity and sustainability are critical aspects of business and that they're dramatically shaping how we do things. That was probably enough from me, just in setting the scene here today before we hand over to our amazing speakers. So let's go back to that theme, Be Brave, Make Change. You're going to hear from two people who are really reshaping how we do things. A word of warning, they're not going to tell you exactly what to do or give you a checklist of actions of what your next steps are. Today's event is an opportunity to step into their shoes and see the world through their eyes. Instead of a panel, Jifa and Jira are going to introduce themselves. They'll each talk about what they do and why, to help us understand the connections between business, country, culture and community. They'll have a bit of a fireside chat and then we'll do some Q&A. So during the Q&A and throughout this whole conversation, if you're online, please feel free to put some comments in the chat function and send through your questions. I'll now hand over to this wonderful Yorta Yorta woman, Jira. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Jira Lala. I am a Yorta Yorta Wiradjuri woman. On my grandmother's side, we're Morgans from Cummeragunja. My grandfather, we're Wiradjuri from Narrandera. And before I start, I want to pay my deepest respects to traditional custodians on this beautiful land. The Wurundjeri people, the Bunurong, all nations of the Kulin Nations, all the people, plants, land of the Kulin Nation. I was born and raised here on this country and I pay my respects and I'm so happy to be back. I escaped Melbourne for some of the last tough couple of years and I'm on my way back now and it's beautiful to be back home on the country that's always kept me safe. Yeah, we're just going to be having chats today. We thought we would, instead of having like a formal panel, would be like me and Jifa having a cup of tea. So I'll give you a quick intro into my work. I run a business that this year turns 10. It's called Kalinya. Kalinya in my language, in Yorta Yorta, means good and beautiful and honest. And I love that in my language, those three words mean the same thing. We know that in English, good and beautiful and honest aren't always the same thing. I started out many years ago just working in comms. I saw incredible things happening in my community. And I didn't understand why the rest of Australia wasn't getting access to those stories. So I studied media marketing and I wanted to share stories. That's evolved and changed over the years. And now I work almost entirely in entrepreneurship. I'm passionate about economic freedom for our people, for us to have the economic freedom to make the choices around the lifestyles that we live. And being in small business has allowed that for me. You know, it's meant that I can travel to different people's countries, that I get to work with different Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses doing incredible things. Now, I would say I'm working with over 100 First Nations businesses around Australia and have travelled extensively around the world learning from First Nations people. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit about one of the businesses that I have been working with, but I reckon I'm going to pass over to Jifa first because we don't just want to hear from me. So, Jifa.
Thank you. By way of introduction, my name's Jifa Greenaway, a proud Walwong Gamilaroi man. And importantly, I guess, what I'm going to show you in the slides subsequently is a bit of a sense of how we can embed authentic Indigenous design into the built and natural environment. So as a trained architect, I'm particularly interested in how we demonstrate design excellence, how we build opportunity towards design equity, and how we actually build an understanding through design of the importance of and the relationality to country. Naturally enough, anything that is built within the natural environment interfaces viscerally with country. So how do we also think about sustainability and caring for country principles? So I'll expand upon that a little bit further.
We're just going to lean right into caring for country, hey? I mean, I feel like that's at the top of everybody's mind, right? Like sustainability, climate change, obviously it's a part of huge national conversation now, but I think also just during lockdowns, like those walks and spending that time in nature meant so much to us. I've seen a really interesting thing happen through the Aboriginal business sector, that when everything went online, a lot of founders moved back to their traditional lands. And now that a lot of, so many products can be bought online, a lot of the guys that I work with have left major cities and are now running incredible businesses from regional and remote towns. But yeah, I wanted to share today, so sponsorship money, like Ange said, it's not going towards the event, it's going towards a business, a rebrand for a business. So I'll project manage pro bono, and so that we can use all of the dollars to do some work with Auntie Pat. Auntie Pat Torres I met when I was up in Broome recently. I realised that holidays for me in Australia aren't really a thing because I just can't help but like try and connect with businesses and end up doing work. But I was up in Broome and I had been wanting to meet Auntie Pat for years. She's so well known and respected in the bush food scene. She was one of the early advocates for wild harvesting. So she grows Kakadu plum, gubbage up in Broome. This is her country, it's really beautiful. And this is one of the tours that she's just launched recently. You know, nephew Louis, you'd know Louis, he's an architect as well. But the reason that I wanted to have a chat about Auntie Pat's practices in relationship to caring for country, I think that her business, it really goes to the heart of like what I love about the way Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are doing business and bringing our cultural practices into entrepreneurship. So wild harvesting is a practice of farming, but it's different from, you know, if you do like mono farming. Is that the proper word for it? You know, when you're planting all the same kind of things in lines, and of course that works for efficiency. It means that you can scale easier. It means that you can make more money, and it means that you can give restaurants or supermarkets the exact quantities they want. The thing is that that doesn't necessarily care for country. And so the kind of wild harvesting that Auntie Pat is really passionate about is regenerating land, that when our bush foods are grown in the way that they're meant to be grown and have always grown, they're higher in nutrients. But it also means that we're continuing custodianship of these fruits and vegetables and plants, and that culture is passed on to future generations. So when she wild harvests, she goes out with her family, and whole families go. Kids go with their parents, they go with their grandparents. That means that intergenerational learning is happening. So grandparents are teaching those babies the stories of those fruit and vegetables, the medicinal purposes of them. And it means that you're on country, you're learning about country, and you're looking after country. But of course that means that you don't get as big a harvest, and it means that you have to charge more. And so that's a lot of the work that I do with businesses, is around positioning their product in the market. So if you've got a product that costs more but is more exclusive, has this incredible story that has so much social impact, so many ripple effects in community, a lot of customers are willing to pay a premium price for that. But you need to know the story, right? Like, it needs to visually tell that story, it needs to connect with customers. So that's the kind of work that I do, and the money raised from this event will go to doing that work with Auntie Pat. So she's got these incredible products, but then we'll work with Aboriginal designers, photographers, copywriters, and be able to do some marketing packaging work so that she can really position her products as premium products in the market. So wild harvesting, caring for country, tell us about the equivalence in your
I guess
industry.
the important message there is it's an integrated way of thinking. So this holistic relationship with country becomes integral. And importantly, what it does is it sets up this relationship which isn't sort of ego-driven, it's eco-driven, and understanding that we sit within a broader system as opposed to sort of privileging the human experience as the only experience. So what it really starts to demonstrate is that symbiotic relationship between plants and animals and people, and stories and narratives and country are all inextricably linked. And in essence, we're trying to find that balance, aren't we? Because we know the moment we start to extract and take something out and throw out that balance, we then start to have some of the challenges that we're confronting: biodiversity loss, all those sustainability challenges of climate change. We can actually be part of the solution in terms of our modes of practice and our ways of working.
Absolutely. And we get to learn so much from each other in that practice. Hey, that's what I'm loving. The more as a business sector, we connect, and we're learning that I don't know anything about farming. I'm a Collingwood girl, like you know, but like when I get to go out bush and learn about these practices, same with the work that we've been doing with GPT and learning from your practice around the built environment and how space kind of affects our relationship to country and how we engage with it. Can we skip now to some of your pictures so we can see space stuff? Ooh, what's that fancy building?
Yeah, so the series of images that you'll see now is, I guess, a snapshot of the sort of architectural design approach that we take. And in many respects too, this holistic approach is embedded in our practice. So while I'm trained as an architect, we do interior design, landscape design, wayfinding, urban design, and we look at projects of different scales across this vast island continent. And importantly, there's one thread that links it all, and it's really understanding, and Jiro experiences this too, I'm sure, is shifting the mode from a transactional to a relational model. So building trust, building affinity, building connection and respect with the communities and the people that we engage with. And so this project is Queen and Collins, a GPT asset. And it's a small intervention, but it's the meaning that underpins it and the way in which we orchestrated this work. And essentially what it is it's a means for pause and respite in the busy metropolis of Melbourne for ceremonial practice. So there's a fire dish here, but we work very collaboratively with Wurundjeri, the traditional custodians of Melbourne. And what we sought to do was to embed an understanding of an orientation towards country, but also embedding truth-telling. So what we've actually done is incorporated this fire pit element, and what you'll see here, and that's Uncle Colin there from Wurundjeri, Uncle Colin Hunter, a terrific advocate and supporter of our work. But you can see on the image on the right there, what we've actually done is we've highlighted places of importance for Wurundjeri, from the falls that existed. Sorry, we've lost the image. The falls, which was across the Birrung, the Yarra River, which was dynamited out in the 1880s, to other places of ceremonial and connection. And so what that did was enable us to engage with some of these stories of country. And so this is a really significant part of what we do. This project here is actually for World Expo in Dubai. And what we were actually tasked to do in this particular intervention was to blend Emirati culture with Indigenous culture to create a majlis, which is a gathering place. And this is where all the VIPs went when they sort of looking at trade and negotiation with DFAT and so forth. But what it embeds here is layers. So we're working with craftspeople, with artisans, with Indigenous creatives, with Indigenous furniture makers. We're using materials of country, kangaroo skins, charred timbers, and starting to evoke that really importance of how we engage with authentic connection through design practice. And that's something that we're really passionate about. What it also enables us to do is to demonstrate the rights to an Indigenous economy, and starting to embed Indigenous procurement strategies and policies as part of our normative practices. And that, I guess, is a really important dimension in terms of what Jira also does in her work, in terms of providing opportunities and providing a mechanism to enable that to happen. So developing those frameworks becomes really important, and I'm sure Jira can expand on that a little bit further.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about having a sustainable Indigenous economy, and I kind of made a change a few years back of spending my own dollars in our economy, and I can spend most of my money now in projects. So I run a number of different projects. Some are collaborations with companies and brands, some are funded programs around Aboriginal people in business, women in STEM, women in investment for a sustainable future. That's kind of my jam. But those programs, think about the amount that you spend just even on like an event and all of the different products that you buy. I set my procurement target at 80%, and for a number of years now I've been able to exceed 80% spend in the Indigenous economy. So during lockdowns, I moved to Queensland and launched a new initiative, which is the Katherine Retreat. So I was running like business events, like meetups, but realised that we needed more time together, that some of the conversations we need to have, they are complex, they are layered. Like Jifa was saying, our business practices are based on relationships and interconnectedness. So we needed time to sit together away from screens, around the fire, and really catch up. And so we started retreats out in the bush, and they're these all-inclusive environments. And I'm able now to source everything from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses, from the shampoo and conditioner to the coffee that we drink, to the everything, all the linens, the decorations, and we get everything handmade, and we get them made with intention. So it creates that layered environment because people are stepping into this space that has been created for them with a purpose. And yeah, so they're kind of really nice utopian little spaces that are places of inspiration as well. But yeah, the procurement side of things is huge now, right? We all started with 1% targets. That was the kind of, when the Indigenous procurement policies came in, it was the 1% targets. And now there's so many programs that are hitting well above 50%.
Yeah. That's right. And so another thing that I endeavour to do in our ways of practice is to demonstrate the value of Indigenous design thinking. And the reality is there are very few Indigenous design practitioners in the built and natural environment. So as best as we can determine, there's maybe half a dozen registered Indigenous architects in the entire country. So what that means is we actually have to develop allyship with non-Indigenous people to deliver on projects, because if the starting premise is all projects in the Australian context are built on Indigenous lands, what does that mean in terms of our ways of practice? And so showcasing and demonstrating, this is the work, we curated the Venice Architecture Biennale last year, and it was showcasing a range of projects around the country of non-Indigenous and Indigenous people collaborating, but also working closely with traditional owners, elders and knowledge keepers as part of that endeavour. And further to that, this idea of embedding caring for country principles as the way in which we should operate. It's not an afterthought, it's not a graft on. It's not like we need to put some solar panels on the roof and we're done. It's actually embedding it in the DNA of the design thinking. This here is the Hobson Bay Wetland Centre, which we're working on at the moment. And it's an educational place. It's a place for knowledge exchange. It's a place about embedding and understanding the ecological systems and how we can touch the earth lightly in terms of the interventions that we undertake. And so what we're seeking to do in this particular proposition is to ensure that the architecture is recessive to country and that the landscape predominates, and the importance of that biodiversity, the understanding the wildlife corridor, understanding this is an important global wetland system that exists in proximity to Melbourne. So that is just core business in terms of the ways in which we work. And this project here is across the Plenty River. We're designing 3 bridges. And working again very closely with Wurundjeri, we're encoding meaning in the work in which we undertake. So it's not the muralisation of culture, it's embedding culture as part of the design thinking, and that therefore shifts the dial in terms of how we think about these notions of celebrating and embracing our shared humanity and our shared stories. And I'm sure through the work that Jura undertakes, storytelling and narrative so important.
Yeah, we've been exploring Indigenous design thinking through product creation. So I've been working with artists to design and create their own products, and then looking end to end at the supply chain. Really from end to end. If you work in those sectors, you know how hard it is to be 100% traceable, but we're really looking at unpicking that, where do things come from, and then how does it align to our cultural values? Who's making the fabric or who's making the clothes? We know that modern slavery is often an Indigenous rights issue as well. And so how do we act in solidarity with Indigenous people in other nations around the country, around the world, and then caring for country? If we're printing fabric that has patterns that speak of the river, but we're using dyes that harm the river, what does, so we're always exploring how our values and our ways of living and being on country kind of work into products. And the hardest part then is, of course, price point. You know, like we all want to make products that speak to country, are connected to country, care for it, we want to tread lightly, but of course that drives up prices. So that's really a lot of my work is around juggling the kind of the impact profitability piece, because we want economic freedom for our communities, but how do we do it in a way that's aligned to our values?
Yeah, and the values thinking is obviously really important. You know, and this sort of work can happen at scale as well. So this is a Marvel Stadium upgrade that we're working on, encoding meaning and connections. And this is the North East Link project, a massive infrastructure project, $11 billion. And it's underpinned by a series of Indigenous design pillars. So working closely with traditional owners as part of thinking about and reimagining the opportunity even in projects at scale as they start to engage viscerally with country. So you can see all these sort of ideas, the common thread is, you know, Indigenous thinking can actually celebrate 67,000 years of continuous connection to this place. And in short,
you know, we could talk about this all day.
That's right. Black design does matter, and we can actually be holding the pen.
I'm going to steal your microphone. So now I have the horrible job of interrupting this chat to take us through to the Q&As. Thank you so much. I had a question around what success looks like for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned businesses. Traditional business, you know, profitability, growth, those are the key drivers. But does that work differently for First Nations owned business?
I mean, I think every business is different, right? And like, I completely respect the right for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to want to build multi-billion-dollar businesses and, you know, create global disruption. Like, I'm cool with that. The businesses that I work closely with and really aligned with and excited about definitely measure success, I think, in a layered approach, that money is only one part and probably a smaller part. If I think about Arnie Pat's business, My Harvest, you know, success there is regenerating land, it is passing on culture, it is speaking language, it's ensuring future generations know their role of looking after the fruit and vegetables and the medicines of this country, it is sharing culture, it's broader education, and it is living in a way, like when you wake up in the morning, that your day ahead of you and you look at your schedule and you look at your diary, your day-to-day actions are in line with your values. I think most of the businesses, no, I know, all the businesses I work with, that's very much what they consider success. When I was growing up, I was always taught that success is having the ability to open the door for the next ones coming up. We very much think in terms of intergenerational stewardship, and that we're designing and working for, you know, generations to come. So I'm at a really nice point in my career, you know, 10 years on in business, where I like to call myself a young auntie. I'm still claiming the young part, but you know, I've got a lot of young ones coming up now that come and work with me, and that we work on projects together. And yeah, that. Oh, I'm claiming it. That feels like success.
Yeah, the other dimension really is that I think particularly in the space that I operate in, we have an ethical and philosophical obligation to use our skills to improve the environment and the context that we work in. And the other dimension around success is that giving back. So invariably, most Indigenous businesses that you encounter do a lot of pro bono work. So it's ensuring that we can actually provide opportunities and build capacity for others as well. And so we know, you know, particularly within the built environment where it requires really a lot of capital, and often smaller Indigenous organisations and entities don't have the means. So sometimes, you know, doing those feasibility studies and doing some of that other work can actually help and enable future projects to get up off the ground. So we do that sort of work. So that is a sign of success, really. And the greatest success really is to hear the feedback from the traditional owners and elders and knowledge keepers when we do it right. And they say, you've actually captured exactly what we wanted and you've listened. And that is a sign of success, because it's not about the scale of the project, it's not about the value of the project, it's not about our ego. Ultimately, we need to park our ego at the door when we're engaging First Nations people, because we can only draw on our own direct experiences. There's over 270 distinct language groups. We can't claim understanding of each nation that we might interface and engage with. So ultimately, we're relying on that generosity of spirit of passing on knowledge and hearing the stories and undertaking those cultural protocols as part of our ways of working. And so that is a really important dimension too, is the privilege that we're actually given to actually work with many.
You both work with a lot of big businesses in Australia. What are the changes that you encourage those big businesses to make to how they work, particularly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned businesses, but more generally from a cultural safety perspective or otherwise?
I had an interesting moment just this week actually. Like, I was talking to someone and was like, oh, who do you think would be best aligned for a potential partnership? And they said, well, what about, I can't answer you, but I can give you all these questions. And I was like, wait, let me rephrase the question. Where are the people that I'm most likely to be able to build a relationship with? That I think that for me, like, I do business with people, with humans, and building those relationships and getting to know people. And sharing in that mutual respect, because I think when you're looking at success from within our framework, it is very hard to measure, because it's a ripple effect, right? Like, it ripples out for generations to come. How do you measure that? But when you're in relationship with people and you hear those day-to-day stories and you see those ripple effects happening, then you can understand the success of the partnership.
It's very appropriate at Reconciliation Week. The theme is Be Brave. And in business, it's about bravery. It's what amount of power are you prepared to cede to enable Indigenous people to participate and contribute into the economy. And so ultimately, it's really about providing and being prepared to take a risk and give opportunities. Because if you're a smaller enterprise, it's hard to crack into the market because you have established relationships, you have bigger entities, they've got proven track record. But sometimes it actually does require that preparedness to take risk and to provide opportunities. And the other thing is, when you have an Indigenous business, and you may have an Indigenous founder, and then they start to grow a little bit and they start to employ people, all the staff aren't necessarily Indigenous. So it's also acknowledging that Indigenous founder is not always going to be in the room at every single meeting, in every single sort of transaction within a business environment. That it's understanding you're engaging an Indigenous business, not an Indigenous single person as the representation of that business. So there's, again, an understanding of how we frame that relationship in terms of that sort of business-to-business connections as well.
And that we do things differently, and that's what you want, right? Like, we talk about the importance of diversity for business outcomes, and it's because we bring different perspectives, different worldviews, and that means that our day-to-day actions are different. And so for me, it's really important to have agreed upon outcomes, like, where do we want to go with this partnership? What are we actually trying to achieve? And then to accept that my way of getting there, my community's way of getting there might be different from the business's established way of doing things. And that's where that relationship is important, to communicate those differences, but also to accept that, like, with a whole different worldview and lens on the world, sometimes you might not understand why we're making certain decisions, and that's okay. That's a part of, I think, being okay with a shift in power dynamics, is that engaging in Aboriginal business means engaging with Aboriginal ways of working as well.
Just a call out to people on the line. That's not a thing, online. If you have any questions, please send them through. I don't know if anyone in the room has any questions they want to raise. I've got plenty more, don't worry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I'm definitely no expert in farming practices, but what I've been told is that when the plants all grow together, it means that they're feeding off each other, which increases the quality of the soil, which means that the foods taste better, that the nutrients are higher, that it is a superior product. But yeah, again, it's like, I think that's a big part of our job when we're in this kind of marketing entrepreneurship space, is repositioning products to, like, I think when you've come from like an almost corporate social responsibility lens, people expect products to either be kind of cheap or sometimes free, whereas like a premium product that has a better taste, a higher nutritional value and scarcity in the market is by nature expensive. And so, yeah, I think in all ways that product is better in my eyes, but it's going to be harder to get. And it means that if somebody's got a restaurant and they need to make sure that there is a certain amount on the menu, which again goes back to those different ways of working, that perhaps the menu has to change with seasons, and perhaps those seasons are Indigenous seasons rather than the 4 that we speak of here.
When we reflect on 10 years ago, today, and the future that we have ahead of us in 10 years' time, we know that the physical environment has changed around us, but also we've seen a really big shift in our values. What are the particular changes that have stood out to you in the last 2 years?
Well, in our particular space, what is clearly changed is a sense and a thirst and a hunger to engage with Indigenous culture in the built and natural environment. Because ultimately, if there is no visibility of First Nations experiences in the places and spaces in which we work and live and engage with, then we have this sort of cultural amnesia that can creep in. But there has been a fundamental shift in the last 2 to 5 years where there's a desire to engage with the stories of country. And I often say you can concrete over country, but country still exists. The stories still remain in place. And importantly, there is a desire to do it in authentic ways as well. And what better way to do that than to facilitate true self-determination, true voice and agency with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous voices. And so that's the fundamental shift that I've noticed in recent years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be really honest with you with this one. I actually never thought that I could reach my ambitions in Australia. I didn't think, like, I've always been ambitious when I was young. I always knew that I wanted big things out of life. And I thought that I had to leave here to be able to do that. I thought as an Aboriginal woman that wasn't an opportunity here for me. And so I've lived all over the world. I bought a condo in Miami, as you do. And so I used to live between here and Miami. And I could never move fully because I love my family and I love my community, I love this land. So I was always kind of torn between countries where I felt like I could embrace my ambitions in an American market and I could be with my people here. And I sold my place in Miami recently because for the first time I feel like I can actually live that life here in Australia. And that is really different and really new for me. And so I can't necessarily kind of articulate exactly all the things that are shifting and changing, but I know for the first time the vision of the life that I had for myself as a little girl now feels possible in this country.
That's amazing. That seems like a really good note to end this on. Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers. Please put your hands together for a round of applause. So I hope that's left you all with some pretty inspiring ideas of what you can do and how you can play a role towards making change in this country for the better. For those of you joining us online, I just really want to say thank you for dialing in. We hope that this has given you some great direction for what brave actions you can take. And we've got 4 more quick things to do before we wrap up today. Firstly, I want to thank the big crew that at GPT that got behind this and really supported this event to come to life. It's a first for us, and I just want to say a big thank you. Secondly, oh, that's nice, thank you. Yeah, well done, team. Secondly, I just want to point out this artwork that you can see behind us, and that's been part of our campaign. It was created by Molly Wallace. She's an incredible young woman. She's currently studying her PhD. She worked at GPT during an internship period for us, and we have loved working with her, and it's really wonderful that we've maintained this relationship. You can find her on Instagram. But also, if you're here in the room and at a GPT asset, we've got a beautiful activation where you can write your commitments for taking brave action on a postcard, and that'll be sent to you, so you'll have a little bit of Molly Wallace in your own homes and in your lives. Thirdly, I said 4 things. Thirdly, get behind Auntie Pat. She's amazing. She's got a brilliant website. Her products are being rebranded. If you've got ideas for how you want to get involved, or if you want to support that, let us know, get in touch. It's just wonderful seeing these incredible businesses operate on country and so holistically connected to our environment. So finally, morning tea is here for us in the room today. Thank you again so much for joining us. For everyone here that's in the room, you should have got a raffle ticket on your way in, and we've got some lucky door prizes to draw.
Okay, lucky number. Yeah. A08, orange.
A08, woo! Pass that to Jira.
Another one?
Another one, please. Got 2.
Green A13. Oh, what's my number too?
Green A13. No one? All right,
Do we do
we'll
another
go
one?
again.
Or I'm keeping it.
Yeah.
No. Green A23.
Green A23. Oh, that's okay. All right, she's offering it back to the group.
Whoa, still going? I really like the green A. This is green A24. Are these all the GPT ones that I keep
Green
calling out?
A24. Have we got a winner?
Hey!
Yes! Well, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day, Money Muck, and we'll talk very soon.